A warm good morning to one and all. On behalf of the organizing committee of the workshop on building proficiency in academic writing, I am delighted to welcome our guests and all the attendees who have joined us to Google Meet 1, Google Meet 2, and via YouTube live stream to the first session of day 5. First of all, may I briefly introduce you to our guest speaker for today's session. We are honored to have with us Professor Kishor Kulkarni from the USA as the speaker for this session. Professor Kulkarni has been a distinguished professor of economics at the Metropolitan State University of Denver, Colorado since 1989. As an adjunct professor, he has also taught at the University of Colorado Boulder, Covet School of International Studies at the University of Denver, Colorado State University, and Colorado School of Mines. Professor Kulkarni completed BA Economics and MA Economics from the University of Pune, which is now called Savitribai Phule University, SPTU, India. He migrated to the United States of America in the year 1976 and completed MA and PhD in economics from the University of Pittsburgh before entering into his real passion of full-time teaching in the year 1980. He was selected in the spring 1994 voyage of the semester's HD program, and he has also delivered many special lectures and seminars all over the world, traveling to around 30 countries. Professor Kulkarni has authored, co-authored, and co-edited 10 books, some of which have become famous textbook adoptions in the USA and Indian universities. He has authored and co-authored 160 received journal articles. He served as the chief editor of International Review of Business and Economics, IRBE. For his numerous research activities, Dr. Kulkarni was recognized with Outstanding Faculty Researcher Award by the Golden Key International Honor Society in the year 1997. His extraordinary teaching skills have brought him several teaching laurels, including the 2001 Outstanding Teaching Award by the Golden Key International Honor Society, inclusion of his biography in Who's Who in the World and Who's Who Among America's Teachers in the year 1992. In the year 2004, the Faculty Senate of the Metropolitan State of Denver handed him Distinguished Service Award, which was followed by the Extraordinary Service Award by the University President in the year 2010. In the year 2012, the Dean of the College of Business recognized him as the first distinguished professor in College of Business, and in the year 2014 was given the Best Teaching Award by Student Economic Society. In May 2017, non-resident Indians NRI Welfare Society of India gave him Pravasi Rath Award, and in March 2019, the Federation of Business Disciplines (FBD) recognized him as the Outstanding Educator Award recipient, together with CISR Foundation, New Delhi, which offered him Outstanding Overseas Accommodation Award. To carry out his research activities, he has held visiting service fellowships and has received many research grants from several institutions like Institute of Humane Studies (IHS), Arlington VA, National Institute of Bank Management NIBS Pune, Reserve Bank of India RBI Mumbai, and Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research IDIDR Mumbai. Sir will be primarily sharing with us his thoughts and views on the topic coronavirus, on research methods and global economy. What happened and where do we go from here? Welcome, sir. It is our pleasure to warmly invite you to the session. I would now request you to kindly address the meeting and invite.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you, Anjali, for that wonderful introduction. I know it was pretty long, and obviously that only means I'm a pretty old person. But I am a pretty old person. I'm 67, and I started teaching at my age of 25. So I think I've been doing the teaching for 42 long years, and over the years, obviously, I have got an opportunity to do a lot of things and entertain the students and educate them a little bit and entertain them more, probably. Um, and but I thank you for that introduction. I also want to thank Dr. Dhananjay Tripathi, who actually took all the pains in contacting me and inviting me to this conference, which I understand now is in the 5th day, and 5 days of a conference is a pretty unique phenomena, especially for those of you who have attended all 5 days. So you probably have heard everything that you wanted to hear about Corona, and also the research, how to do research, how become a well-established author and things like that. So my job is in a way easy. All I can do is just summarize in 2 minutes that I agree with all the speakers who spoke for the last 5 days, and just leave the meeting. But then I'm not going to do all that. I think I also want to say that I know I got a lot of good morning wishes from there, and that's wonderful. Only thing is this place that I'm speaking right now, we are here at 9:38 p.m. So it's now almost a night time, and I'm an early person who goes to sleep early and get up early. So about 9:30 or 10, I start sleeping. But it's just because it is your conference, I have decided to stay awake and hopefully speak nicely. And if you anytime think I'm speaking in sleep, then that's probably true. I will be speaking in sleep. But then then that was just a humor, guys. But then don't mislead by that, because my wife says I make better sense when I talk in the sleep rather than when I'm awake. So I think it should be all right. I think we will do in next 1 hour and 15 minutes we'll do some fun stuff and so. Well, thanks for being all of you here. I see that there are almost 90 participants right there in front of me. I have been told by Dr. Tripathi that there are some in the conference room, and some might be seeing us on a streaming video, and all that is wonderful. I'm so glad all of you are here. I hope I make your time paid off by one way or the other. Okay, let's get started then. I think let's start talking about what we are here for. And basically what we are here for is how the last 7 months, probably 8 months, have changed our life. And if 7 months have not changed your life, then of course you are not living on this planet, because almost everybody on this planet Earth has gotten affected by what has happened with the coronavirus pandemic. It is a pandemic which has touched all countries. Of course, India and where I live in the USA are at the top of the most inflicted countries of the world, and that way I think we all are having a pretty bad impact of coronavirus. This truly is an event which has not only gotten into some macroeconomic effects of it all over the world, but it has also gotten personally for you and me the effect of academic life. I think our academic life has changed quite a bit. It has changed for us, and I know I can easily visualize that your life has changed quite a bit there too, whether you are a student, a graduate student, or a PhD student, or a faculty member. All of us have really adopted a new way of life. In fact, this new way of life started in March and April for us, is so dramatic, and it is so fundamentally different that we had to get adjusted to this. And how fast you get adjusted to this probably decides how efficient you are going to be in the future. In my personal case, I think and I have a pretty well used macroeconomics principles of macroeconomics textbook. And right now, at this moment, my number one job is to get writing a new chapter for that macroeconomics textbook, because the macroeconomics textbook is pretty useless if you do not have coronavirus in it by January or February, because so much has been changed and so much has been remodified that a macro textbook has to have a chapter on coronavirus effects. And that's what I'm doing. And when I'm doing it, and I know that is just an experience which will give me some kind of a pretense of what is happening with every other researcher's life, that while I'm doing all this research on writing a new chapter, I'm finding not only some challenges and hardships, but also some new opportunities. And I think one opportunity is right here, that I can speak to you. You guys are in Sikkim. Probably you are very green, have gotten a lot of rain there. I'm here in Denver, Colorado. And we can easily speak to each other thanks to this new technology of Zoom, which is now well accepted all over the world. And no, not just Zoom, but Google and every other instrument to do that. So whatever the instrument you are using, of course, our life is changed and our research methods have changed. So to come to our topic of how Corona has affected our research methods, one thing is obviously that in last 8 or 9 months, and I don't know how long further we have to go, depending upon how fast we get the vaccine and depending upon how fast we get the cure for this pandemic. I don't know when and how I will visit our university's library. And those of us who have done a lot of research, without visiting library, we rarely have done any research before. We always have gone to the library, gotten the books from there, the hard copies of the books. We read those books, we took the notes, we analyzed those ideas, got the models from there, and library was the place for us to go and get most of the new information. All that is changed. I haven't been to the library for almost 8 months now. Probably I won't be there definitely until next summer, because our university has already decided that all our classes will be taught online or on some kind of a method like Zoom or Google or Microsoft Teams. That one of those avenues, that's how we will teach our classes all the way up to August of 2021, because most of the business classes, and I teach economics, so economics included in there. All these classes can easily be taught on the Zoom. We are not like physics or chemistry or biology, which needs, or psychology, which need the lab work. And the courses that need the lab work, they will come to the campus. And they have been coming to the campus with some kind of social distancing or not. The point I'm trying to make is that as a researcher, I don't think I am going to the campus, I'm going to the library, I'm going to even my office. My office now is completely in my dining room and a dining table, where everything is scattered here, computer, the printer, and and all my notes and all my teaching material is right behind me there. And so my house is clearly my office now. I don't go out a whole lot at all. So how in the world am I going to do this research? How in the world are you going to do the research if you are doing any substantial research? And the answer is, of course, that the hard copies, the physical books, accessibility is zero. So we can't really get the hard copies. And therefore we had to completely rely on computer sources. And when we talk about the computer sources, there is one source that I would like all of you to be a part of, because it is a wonderful source. It is a source which which gives me abundant information about any topic that I am researching. And that's what I do. That's what all of you should do. And here is that research. So it is called a website, and there might be a similar website somewhere else, like a Google Scholar. But the website that is dear to my mind is the website called researchgate.net. So spell research correctly, put gate, G-A-T-E there, one word, researchgate, and it's not .com, it is .net. And it is a website run in Europe. I think it's in Germany, head office is in Germany, but it is an absolutely wonderful website, because what happens on that researchgate.net website is that roughly 5 to 7 million researchers in the world have uploaded their work on researchgate.net. And you should be a member of it. You become a member by just filling out your information there, your institute's email address, and they make you a member. It's all free membership. It is all free research for everybody anyway. So 5 million researchers have put their work in there. I know there are some who have only referred to their articles there, but somebody like me, I have put all my 155 journal articles. The information about all my 10 books are there. In fact, about 2 summers ago, I just hired an assistant who put all my work on researchgate.net. And my each and every article can be read there. So if you go there, you search my name, you pop out will be all my articles in there. And people all over the world. In fact, I'm very happy to say that I have now crossed the number of people who have read my article, about 85,000. So 85,000 times my articles are, one article or the other has been read by somebody in the world. And all over the world, researchgate.net gives an access. So you should be a member of that as quickly as possible, maybe right after this conference, and start using researchgate.net. And in there, all you have to do is just type a topic name, and out pops all the research that has been done on that topic by other people. There are some articles which are readily available to you, so you can just print it, see it on computer, or the articles which are not there, you can just request the author to get it. And some authors probably oblige to that, and they give you the access to their article, and you get it. So that, I think that is a source which modern researchers should use. And that is not the only source, because besides researchgate.net, there might be a Google Scholar, there could be SSRN, Social Sciences Research Network, SSRN.com. So you should use some of these resources online, because that there is no other option. We don't really have an option of going to any library or any friend's house and get their book to use in your research. So might as well do that online stuff. After I do that, then in order to finish a good paper, I will obviously have to do the literature survey. So I do, and in last 5 days, you may have heard that a good paper will consist of a good literature survey. You have to look at it. You have to look at how other people have dealt with that topic and how you are going to deal with the similar topic as well. And then you have to do the literature survey. Then you have some models. So you build a model, or you use somebody else's model with your new data. And once you get the data and the model, you estimate some results and put forward those results. At least in economics, that's a pretty standard thing to do to get a publishable paper finished. And over the years, I have been running this journal. I'm a chief editor of that international review of business and economics, IRBE. In fact, our website is irbejournal.com. Take a look at it someday. But irbejournal.com I get a lot of papers submitted to that journal. So I get to read many of these articles, and I think usually our frame of work is is what I just described. Now, having said that, I think any inspiring young researcher should do online research and talk about how the research method should work and how a paper will be completed, and then of course you do a publishable article. That's what basically we have to do in this modern environment, that do all our research. Now, that is one thing. The second thing is about the interaction. In olden days, we obviously had an opportunity to meet our friends, our graduate students, our other research assistants, the secretaries, the administrative assistants, and basically the mentors. Now, all that interaction is becoming almost zero now. You have to use the mask. If you don't use the mask, you obviously get into trouble. As our president has gotten into trouble. American president, as probably some of you have heard, is now coronavirus positive. He has been transported to hospital a few hours ago. So wearing the mask is very, very necessary. If you do that, then you probably interact with your friends and your mentors and all. But in the absence of all that interaction, you just have to do the emailing and talk to each other and send your attachments to each other. And so the modern environment of research is completely different than the old environment of research. And the corona has changed our life in this fashion for last 8 to 10 months. We don't know how long will this stay with us as far as research methods are concerned. And therefore, we have some challenging stuff going on. We have some amazing stuff going on in research methods or doing the research. And I don't want to repeat, I think almost everything has been said to you in last 4 or 5 days in this conference. So besides saying that this is what you should be doing, and I can come back and address your specific questions right after my presentation. If you have any questions about these research methods and how to do research in modern times and how to publish papers in modern times, because I think there is a humongous number of online journals now. There are journals which are into complete e-journals, electronic journals. They don't even print anything. And if they are not printing anything, no reason to really put your articles in the print. So most of the journals are just online journals, and there are quite a few of those. If you search in your area, of course you will get an access to many of those online journals. Some of them are even not very good journals because they charge you money to publish in there. And my rule of thumb is that I never publish anything which charges me because generally the quality journals don't really ask you for money to publish in there, and except some nominal fee of processing fee. But otherwise, if they are asking you way too much money, then it is clearly a journal which you shouldn't be fooling around with. And that is my rule for a very, very long time. I never pay any journal to publish my work. But as I said, if you have any specific questions about the research methods and change in our life because of corona, as far as the research methods are concerned, you can always approach to me after my presentation, because what we are going to do now is get a slight turn in this discussion. And we want to now start talking about what are the corona effects on the macro economy as such, because I know the macroeconomic effects of corona are even more substantial, more dramatic than the corona's effect on our research ideas and research methods. Because macroeconomics, in terms of how the economy have gotten very close to collapse is not really a good word, and really speaking, none of the macroeconomics have really collapsed, but they have definitely fallen off the cliff. Because if I take you back to March, and as far as the US is concerned, in the US, in about 4 weeks' time, the unemployment in the US increased from roughly 3.5 to 4%, all the way to 25%. So in March of second week or third week, US had unemployment of about 4%. In April of fourth week of April, we had unemployment of over 25%. And this increase in unemployment, because almost everything was shut down, there was a complete lockdown, and nobody could go to their work and nobody could work. Restaurants, entertainment, transportation, hoteling, many of these industries had zero work. And because they had zero work, the unemployment was very high. They had no employment as such. And I bet a similar story can be repeated in India. And we had some migrant problem. People were just trying to go to their original place of living, and they were walking several miles, and that was a pretty humongous migrant problem in India. But similar problems happen in US, not the migrant problem, but the problems of just shutting down most of these businesses. And as businesses got shut down, there was no employment. And as there was no employment, the unemployment started increasing. Now, I know a lot of times people argue, well, 25% employment, of course, is a very dramatic thing. But didn't this happen in Great Depression as well? Because in Great Depression era, at least in the brunt of Great Depression, say in 1933, US had roughly 25% unemployment as well. And US had 25% unemployment now also. So they say, well, what is the difference? And here is a major difference. The major difference between the Great Depression's 25% unemployment and this April or May month 25% unemployment was that in Great Depression, to reach to 25%, the US economy took pretty nice long 4 years, because for 4 years from 1929 to 1933, the US economy was in doldrums, and it was having an increasing unemployment. In fact, in 1928-29 time period, unemployment in US was only 4% or so. But in 1933, in just 4 years, it increasingly got worse, 12%, 17%, 19%, and then finally 24% in 1933. And it took 4 years to reach to 25. Here, it took less than 4 weeks to reach to 25. And that is just a sign of how economy just fell off the cliff here. So it was a sudden change in economic performance, and this sudden change was obviously a result of a lockdown that occurred. Now, that type of lockdown or that type of shutting down the whole economy had never happened in the history of US. So people will probably make a parallel comparison of a plague epidemic, or that was a pandemic too, 1920 pandemic, and that happened in 1920. So exactly 100 years ago in US, they had a similar pandemic and similar closing down and shutting down of everything. But this 1920 pandemic of corona is worse than the plague pandemic of 1920. Because in 2020, this year, I think the problems were more severe, and very few people were alive in 1920 to really remember how the plague endemic happened that time. But here we know that nobody has seen anything like this before. And I left India and I left Pune when I was only 23. Now I'm 67. So I left Pune in 1976. So 44 years I've been in the US, and in 44 years I've been observing the US economy very closely and carefully. And I can vouch that in 44 to 50 years, we have gotten some bad years here, but clearly none of those years were as bad as what happened in 2020. So because the problem is so severe and so dramatic, we had a pretty interesting policy reactions to it too. Because if you look at the policy reactions, the US policymakers, and assuming all of you know the difference between a fiscal policy and a monetary policy, but fiscal policy is the one that makes changes in taxes and the government expenditure, and government expenditure is decided by fiscal policy. And in case of US, fiscal policy decisions are made by two determinants. One is the Congress. Both houses of the Congress have to pass the spending bills, and the other is the president. President has to sign each and every spending bill to make it a law, and that's how the spending is done. Well, as soon as the severity of this problem was known in May and June, Congress got to work. And in May, they passed two successive bills to spend so much money or so much expenditure that they came up with a plan of $2.8 trillion worth expenditure in the first bill that they passed in Congress, and the president signed it. $2.8 trillion is a lot of expenditure. 2.8 trillion, and trillion is a billion, and 10 crores is 1 billion. So 10 crores is 1 billion, and 1,000 billion is a trillion. So roughly 10,000 crores is 1 trillion. And the Congress decided to spend $2.8 trillion worth expenditure right in the first bill. So that comes out to be 280,000 crores dollars, and multiply that by 75 if you want to really look at how many rupees were there. And that clearly was a humongous number. And therefore clearly the fiscal policy took that first step of spending $2.8 trillion in May, and it was immediately joined by another round of expenditure of $1.4 trillion. So the second bill spent one more time, 1.4. So in just two bills that Congress passed and the president signed, US Congress or fiscal policy of US spent $4.2 trillion worth expenditure in a matter of few weeks. Now, I know you will say, well, 4.2 trillion is a pretty big number. We understand that. But here is another comparison, another yardstick for you to compare. That $4.2 trillion is probably an expenditure for the US government for the whole year. So $4.2 trillion they spend, actually in reality it is only 3.9, but let's say $4 trillion they spend whole year in 2019. Then in 2020, we clearly doubled that. We doubled, already we have doubled it. Means we are not done with 2020 as yet. And as I speak here and as you listen to me here, Congress is haggling and talking about spending another round of 1.2 trillion this week, next week, or whenever they get the compromise and they pass that bill in Congress's both houses, they will spend another $1.2 trillion. So we are not done yet, but let's assume that that bill is passed in next month or so, then we will end up spending roughly $10 trillion worth government expenditure at the end of 2020, assuming nothing more severe happens again. And this happens to be an election year in the US. So clearly the expenditure of the government does increase in the election year. This year is clearly no exception. They have increased it to 10. Now you will say, well, that's okay. If $10 trillion are spent, don't they collect in a lot of taxes? And you are absolutely right. They do have high taxes in the US and the collection is pretty high. But don't forget, because the business activity was at standstill, the tax revenues did not increase very much. And as it is, tax revenues are roughly $2.5 trillion, or at the most $3 trillion, leading us to a deficit of about $1 trillion. So they spend every year $4 trillion worth government expenditure, collect tax revenue roughly of $3 trillion, and they end up a budget deficit of $1 trillion. And don't forget, as I said, 1 trillion is 1,000 billion, and 1 billion is a 10 crore. So 1 trillion is 10,000 crores of dollars. That's how big the US budget deficit usually is. And if that big budget deficit is there, just imagine what is going to happen in 2020 now. That we have had an expenditure of $10 trillion the way we are progressing. We have a government tax revenue of only 2.5 or at the most $3 trillion. That is going to leave a $7 trillion budget deficit for the US government. And as this budget deficit is going to be so huge, increasing from roughly 1.2 to 1.5 trillion to 7 trillion, and it's going to be increasing by 400%. It's 4 times increasing the budget deficit. Of course, the government will be forced to sell bonds to the public, and because without that, government is not going to get the money to spend to finance this deficit. And once that deficit is financed by selling bonds to the public, of course, the price of bond goes down and the interest rate goes up. And that's where the job of monetary policy comes into picture. And those of you who know, the monetary policy is the policy of the government which controls the interest rate and the money supply. That monetary policy in the US is undertaken by a special system. We call it a Federal Reserve System, and the Federal Reserve System is in charge of the monetary policy in the US. Well, that Federal Reserve System is headed by a guy named Jerome Powell. He's the chairman of Federal Reserve Board. And Jerome Powell and Federal Reserve Board have already decided that they will not allow the interest rate to go up in the US, which means the interest rate has already been brought down to a very low level. I know you will be surprised, those of you who are not paying attention to US economy. I have a very interesting news for you, that thanks to the monetary policy's decision to keep the interest rate as low as possible, namely at 0.5% for the banks to borrow from Federal Reserve. That's all the interest rate banks will be charged if they want to borrow from Federal Reserve. We call that a discount rate. And the discount rate decided by Federal Reserve is very, very low, 0.5%. No wonder then banks can borrow from Federal Reserve at a very, very low, almost 0%, and they will turn around and give to the customers the mortgage loans. And imagine what is the mortgage loan rate in the US these days. If you are if you are if you are borrowing for your house financing, I know in India it could be 8%, 9%, 10%, 6% at the most. Bank employees will get a special discount, probably 5%. But in the US, we can borrow mortgages at, and if it is a 30-year mortgage, ready for this, 2.5%, guys. So the mortgage interest rate has gone down to 2.5%. Very recently, Federal Reserve has declared that this low interest rate will continue for the whole 2021 year. So they have assured us that they will not probably allow this interest rate to go up further. What does that mean? That means, of course, the loans are very clearly given at a very low interest rate. And if the loans are borrowed more and more, then you and I will borrow more, will pay our bills, and the transactions will go up, and money supply will go up, because money supply is essentially in bank deposits here as well as in US, the way we define it. And then as our payments go up, our bank deposits go up too. So the bank deposits will go up, and then we obviously have higher money supply. So the money supply in the US is increased quite a bit. The fiscal policy has been, the technical word for that is expansionary. And by expansionary means government expenditure is much higher than the tax revenue. And all these expansionary policy actions, fiscal policy as well as the monetary policy, have led the US economy to some kind of a incentive to spend more. And therefore the spending has been boosted by all these expansionary policy actions. And US is no exception. Same thing has happened in UK, same thing has happened in Germany, same thing as, of course, you guys in India are observing about the same thing too. We have 70 lakh crore program to be spent in terms of government expenditure in India, and therefore the Indian government is also heavily into giving you aid and spending, and therefore India is following the same expansionary policy path. Germany, as I said, Germany is doing it. Japan has been doing it for several years. Coronavirus has made Japan spend more too. So all over the world, and all these big economies matter the most for the whole world. So the whole EU matters, US matters, China matters, and China has been, in China, the economic laws are not very applicable to the Chinese economy, because almost everything is controlled by the government in terms of consumption and investment and government expenditure, exports and imports. So everything is controlled very heavily in China, and therefore Chinese structure is a whole lot different than most of the free world, India included, and therefore so what we are saying is that Corona has made a dramatic change in the macroeconomies, and that has forced the policymakers to change the policies in a very, another time we'll use the same word, in a very dramatic way. So there is a change in economy in a very dramatic way, and there is a change in policies in a dramatic way, not just in the US, all over the world. We have the same story to be talked about in Europe. And so the next question we want to know is, or we want to know the answer for, is what's wrong in all this? If government is spending nicely so much amount, and I know as far as one of those special bills that Congress passed, especially that $2.8 trillion bill that Congress passed. One arrangement was to actually give a cash back to the public. They actually sent the checks to all the taxpayers at their house. There was a sticky point that President Trump wanted to send those checks with his signature, which is unusual, but he insisted that the check will be written and his signature will be there so that he can win some votes on that too. So I got my check too. And everybody got a special incentive from the government with all this extra money. And then they the idea was that we will go out and spend more, and that will increase the demand, aggregate demand, and that will raise the economic performance. Well, question is, what's wrong with all this? Well, most of the wrong things are going to be found very soon in the future, because the main important thing that is wrong is, where does this money come from to spend to this level? And that money has to be borrowed by the Department of Treasury. And that's what Treasury does, that they just sell bonds to borrow all this money. And then the Treasury bonds have to be flooded in the bond market. And of course, that will create a humongous national debt. And this national debt as a percentage of GDP is pretty high in the US. India even has a lower percentage of the national debt to the GDP ratio. So India does a much better job of borrowing what they can repay off. US does a horrible job of borrowing when we don't have a capacity to repay that. So in order to finance this increased government expenditure, more and more borrowing has to be done, and that will increase the national debt. And if the national debt gets out of hand, then it becomes a big problem for the government to do. So government to solve. And when will that problem come? Well, it may come whenever it has to. It could be 5 years, 10 years. It's hard to pin down the calendar year when it will arrive here. All we can say is that we are headed in a direction where that problem will come. If it comes after 20, 25 years, then this generation of Americans who have created this problem will pass that problem of repayment to the next generation. So this generation is pretty smart. They are borrowing quite a bit, and the repayment will be postponed to the next generation. And if the next generation is as smart as this generation, they will probably pass it on to the following generation. But whatever it is, it will be a future important problem of the repayment of this national debt. Similar thing can be said about too much increase in money supply, because if money supply is increased by a very large number, like it is being increased this year, then we end up having increase in prices sooner or later. And those increase in prices popularly called inflation. Inflation gets worse. Now, similar thing can happen in India. In fact, in India, the aggregate supply, the supply of all goods and services is not as flexible as it is in the US. And for resource constraint, for input constraints, for most of the inelastic supply conditions, which would lead to a smaller increase in supply of goods and services than in US. And that, if the supply is not very elastic, then the prices start going up, because if the aggregate demand goes up and if the aggregate supply does not keep up with this increase in aggregate demand, then the prices have to go up, and they do. So there is always this danger of future inflation in the economy, and that future inflation danger is here as well as in India. and it is definitely there in EU, because in EU also we have a similar problem, similar debt conditions, and in fact, European Union, now that England has decided not to join European Union, Brexit has cleared their way to get out. The remaining members, 28 countries are the members of European Union. All these 28 countries have internal problems because of Corona. And in fact, Spain, Germany, and Argentina, and Greece and Turkey, and all these countries have their internal problems increased by Corona evidence, and therefore clearly EU will have about the same problem to solve. So all in all, we are seeing that the global economy is headed for future problems. And we don't know how as I said, it's very hard to put down a calendar year that this is the year when all the things will be so bad that there will be some kind of a challenge to reconcile all these problems and solve them. Now, with that, I'm going to stop talking about macroeconomy now, because I think you got the feel. The feel is that most of these expansionary monetary and fiscal policies are okay to make coronavirus problem more manageable, but these solutions are having a potentially very dramatic future, especially for future generation, to solve these humongous problems that these expansionary policy may create. And inflation problem is there, national debt problem is there, and obviously the whole financial crisis possibility is there. So all those possibilities are there, and therefore the macroeconomy of the whole global nature is looking for more problems in the future. Our problems are not done with as yet, and I wish I had a better news for you, but I really don't, because and these trends of national debt or some kind of problems with Japan and Germany have been there for a long time, and long in a sense, at least 4, 5, 6 years we were predicting. And those of you who think I'm just lying to it, I'm not lying, because in 2017, my co-author and I we published a paper, and it is published in a Delhi journal called Global Business Review. In there, my co-author and I, we predicted that most of these major economies of the world are having some kind of a problem, and therefore the global economy is headed for some kind of a challenge as such. In India, it is already published in 2017. Unfortunately, my co-author and I have gotten right for the wrong reason, thanks to coronavirus, and therefore we are obviously not really rejoicing our prediction. We are obviously consoling each other that this shouldn't have been this way, but it is there. I know on the chat I'm getting several questions there, but let me finish about this macroeconomic effects with the 3 important points that Corona has made this year to happen. The number 1 point that is happening, which is different, is that the international trade or the global trade has significantly shrunk as more and more countries are getting isolated from the rest of the world. We are canceling the flights, we are canceling the transport, we are getting suspicious of each other. China is number 1 culprit in all that. The whole world is getting suspicious of China. I know India and China are having border problems besides any other problems too. So as more and more countries get suspicious of each other, this corona has made international trade shrink a little bit. And as international trade has shrunk, this is probably the first year when the global trade volume has come down rather than going up. Almost every year for last 70 years or so, we have had increasing international trade. Well, of course, as the international trade shrinks, the benefits of international trade become unknown to us, and as benefits of international trade don't occur, the whole world loses. And I know if India wants to tackle this problem, India should sign free trade agreements with other countries and not necessarily countries which don't really satisfy our political interest. But then there are a lot of friendly countries out there that we should increase our international trade and go back to so-called normal, which normally is to raise the level of international trade, because there are benefits of doing that to both countries. That's the first point, that a tremendous decline in international trade has happened. The second is the call for free markets, call for freedom of doing businesses, the call for reduction in government role. All those calls have been muted by coronavirus, because as we just already talked about, the government role in the economy has increased rather than gone down. And therefore, the freedom of markets, the deregulation, reduction in taxes, all those things are going to be the thing of past, because the way we are moving ahead, government sector has become more powerful, more enforceful, and the government sector therefore has increased its role in the economy. And therefore, as I said, the talk of obviously the freedom of the world has really gone down. And the third, which is probably the most important point, and I think is a very relevant point for India as well, is that most of the economic crises lead to increase in unequal distribution of income, which obviously means economic crises make rich people richer and poor people poor. The crises affect the poor people more than it affects rich people, because rich people obviously have ways to increase their wealth one way or the other, and the poor people obviously don't have those acumen, knowledge, and resources to increase their income in a crisis situation, and therefore most of the crises lead to a wider inequality of income. Corona is no exception to that. And just to make my point very clear, last week they came up with a finding that the billionaires in the US, when you count all billionaires of US, they have increased the wealth by 30% in just 8 months. So in 8 months, 30% increase in the billionaires' wealth is clearly a sign of income distribution being more and more unequal. And that, as I said, that is just an example of US, but in India, about the same thing can. Our studies are not complete as yet in India, but when they are complete, you will find similar results there as well. And I know I have been bombarded with questions of how the higher education is going to change. That's exactly what my third point was going to be, because the higher education has become such a dramatic, challenging business now that we don't know how we are going to tackle all this business of staying home, keeping social distancing, not having interaction, the physical interaction like we used to. And that is a problem. I see that as a problem because I know I teach several classes. In fact, I've been teaching for 15 hours a week in last 5 weeks or so. So I have about 5 different courses, 4 in my Metropolitan State University of Denver, and 1 in University of Denver, it's a PhD master's level class. And I end up talking at least 15, 20 hours a week very easily. And these webinars not included in all my regular work. But classes like these and informative, I used to do all that face-to-face rather than online. Now I'm doing it online. The higher education has gotten into a very big problem now because students and parents of the students are finding out that if education is going to be only online, then why are we being charged so much high level of fees? And India obviously is thinking about that too. You are under very uncertain future. Even next year, you don't know how the education will be dealt with. And to be honest with you, I don't have any answer. I mean, if you're looking at me, I probably know what's going to happen next year. Then let me be honest with you. I don't know what the answer is. If this corona thing doesn't get better, if coronavirus is not controlled either by the vaccine or by a very satisfactory cure, then we are looking at a pretty big challenge for higher education. That higher education is, of course, it looks like it will be again online, an interactive way, and we have limitations for that in India. And I know you guys are in Sikkim, but about the same thing is happening in Maharashtra and where I am from, and in the rural areas are even worse than in urban areas where probably computer accessibility is better in big cities than in small town. And then students have to learn very fast all the deal of computer learning. Professors have to learn very fast all the skills of teaching on computer. So in general, we are looking for a very uncertain future and uncertain time where we don't really have a complete solution for this, and only time will tell how efficient we are in controlling this virus. That's number one. And then once the virus is controlled, what will be our new normal that time? And depending upon what our new normal is going to be, how efficient we are in imparting the education to our students. And it's going to be different. The new normal is not going to be the old normal. I know I have a 4-year-old grandson here, and he has already started learning in his preschool. Yeah, he's not even in kindergarten yet. He's in a pre-kindergarten when he's 4. But his school for 2 hours is on computer. And if this continues to happen in his KG, kindergarten, and also in first grade, second grade, third grade, he probably will never know that there was something called face-to-face education, where the professor was coming into the class and they were actually being taught and they were given notes and they were taking notes. So maybe the old normal is bygone by next few years if this corona thing and the social distancing scenario continues for a few more years. Now, I certainly hope, as an old timer who has been in this business for 4 decades and longer, I clearly and definitely hope that we go back to the old normal, because I enjoyed being in the classroom. I enjoyed seeing the student rather than talking them on computer. And I definitely learn a lot from the interaction with the students. None of those things are going to happen in the future. That is very scary, some outcome for me. I definitely don't want us to head to in that direction next year or year after. I want to come back to the old normal, but I really doubt whether we will completely go back to the old normal or not. I know I was speaking for 1 hour and 1 hour and 5 minutes non-stop. And I don't think any one of you had intention and on a chat room I got about 53 queries there. I got about questions of different nature there. But I think, I don't know how the conference organizers want to do this. But Anjali, do you know how we are going to handle the questions? Are they going to send me on the chat, or are they going to be able to speak to me?
So we will be taking the questions right after your talk.
Yes, I think I start taking the questions now because in next 15 or 20 minutes I will answer those questions, and then we will finish it on time at your 10:30 and my 11 o'clock. It is, yeah, it's getting close to 11 o'clock, guys. Past my bedtime very easily, but I'm going to stay awake just because I love you and I want to be with you on this computer. And one question actually just came to me, that why there is so much uncertainty, and I said, yeah, there is going to be an uncertainty. Very good. But I think I'm ready, Anjali, whenever you want to handle those questions.
Yes, I will take the first question from Dr. Venugopal.
Okay.
He asked a question about print version versus online publication. Which is the best one?
Oh, actually, that's a good question. Well, I would definitely not do anything that is not Scopus listed. I think Scopus is the UGC list is there, and you want to concentrate on some quality journal, even if you are a first time publishing. So if you are a young, energetic new guy, and if you have completed a good paper, then first thing I will do is I will complete the paper to best of my ability and get it organized in such a way that I will tell myself that this is a publishable paper. And probably I will show, if my English is rusty, and don't forget, I came from Pune, India to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So my English was rusty 44 years ago. Not that it is any better. It is little better. I think I can speak a little bit better. Don't you think so? But yeah, I think I have learned a little bit of English in 44 years. But in those days especially, I always got my paper either supported by my friend. I just told him, would you please read this paper and tell me what difference. Then he or she gave me a lot of comments about how to make it better. You should do that too. Show it to somebody who knows that subject and can correct your English. And I still make some mistakes in expression, and people correct me and I accept those. And once I am convinced that my paper is publishable, I will send it to some Scopus listed journal. Many times these journals have referees, and I would get to a refereed journal, and these referees will give me some comments of how to make this paper better. And these referees probably recommend do all this and do all this, and then we will publish your paper. Or some referees will say, because you don't have all these things in your paper, we reject your paper. And then I will revise that paper according to some referees' comments and then send it to some other journal. But then that some other journal is also going to be a pretty good high quality journal, as high as you can get. All these journals are ranked very nicely online. All you have to do is just search online and you will get the names of the journal. Very popular list is published by a company called CABELL, Cabels. I think it is cabels.com. And cabels.com has has a long list of journals in all areas of research. So you should use that. Very good. Well, thank you very much for that question. Next one.
So we have another question from Dr. Debanjan. The question reads, how the COVID pandemic has affected the review process of the journals?
Well, the review process of the journal has in fact gotten little bit disturbed because referees don't really respond as good when they are supposed to be doing an online refereeing process. Of course, serious referees, I mean, there are exceptions to what I'm saying, but there are some not so serious referees. They don't like to read the whole paper on computer, and their comments come late. So all those complications are getting there in online publication. But then we just do the best we can. We just change the referee and send the paper to probably 2 or 3 referees, and even if only 2 respond, we make our decision of whether to publish that article or not.
Thank you, sir. We'll take another question from Alka Singh. How reliable is it to get published in open source journals, open access journals?
How reliable it is to all right. Well, I think it is all up to your institution's policies about it. I don't know what NIT does, but probably I would say that most of the institutions here as well as in India, are decided by what institutions say is the referee journal is what they're looking for. In fact, in the US, we want the journal to be listed in the Cabels list, and then they are considered to be a standard journal. But it depends on which institute you are working with and what their policies are. In general, open access journals obviously are not a very good journal. That's why they're open access, and therefore you should go to the referred journal rather than open access journal.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Dr. Maxia. He asked, how does the escalation in the front of international trade supremacy between the USA and China led to the prevailing worldwide phenomenon of economic depression, fiscal deficit, and unemployment? So how to deal with it, and what are the takeaways for our country, India?
Well, I think the main, let's go back to what the presumption is, that this is a war between China and US, and presumptive war, of course, is a war of the virus. I don't really believe in that conspiracy thinking that China on purpose did this. I don't think any human being, China included in it, wants to do this on purpose and really create a problem worldwide, because self-interest of China is not really to create this problem and have a reduction in international trade, because they were doing such a great job from 1990 all the way up to 2020, and they have become a pretty big superpower, and this superpower position for China, I don't think they wanted to on purpose get disturbed. So having this conspiracy thing, I don't really believe it. But then has it really created a challenge for US? And the answer is absolutely yes, because whether intentional or unintentional, as I said, this crisis has really created a very humongous challenge for US and I think for the rest of the world as well, and also for India. So yeah, it is a challenge which is probably unintentionally created. I don't think it is intentionally created.
Thank you, sir. So Marcia has another question. What are your views for our country, India, to improve the capabilities on external trade in agriculture, and manufacturing sectors to achieve the GDP growth rate of 10%?
Hmm. That's a good question. And I want to be honest about it. I want to say that with the increased GDP of almost 3.5 to 4 trillion dollars in US, 4 trillion dollars in US terms, India has done a marvelous job from 1990 to 2020. Barring none, I think all governments have done a fantastic job of opening the trade, deregulating the Indian economy, increasing the competition, enforcing software and other computer-oriented industries which are dominating our exports. And we have done a very, very good job in dominating the whole world in software technology and computer science. Do we really have a comparative advantage in agricultural products? The answer is yes. Depends which country you are talking to. If you are talking to Bangladesh and Ceylon and some neighboring other countries where India is clearly having a comparative advantage, even in agricultural products, we should export the agricultural products to them because there are trade benefits in doing so. But then again, our excessive agricultural production is not very significant. So we don't really look at agricultural sector as the main export sector to dominate the world market. Well, barring aside probably sugarcane, corn probably, rice a little bit, mangoes obviously. We are probably the sole largest exporter of mangoes in the world, and therefore India has some agricultural products where they can dominate the world with, but otherwise we have a large consumption of agricultural products at home, and therefore the excess production is really not that much. We do want to concentrate on manufacturing, and again there also we have a comparative advantage in manufacturing only for the countries that don't do as good manufacturing as us, and that's where we should be exporting, and I think that's where the competitive advantage lies for India. Very good question.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Dr. Venugopal. He asked, the teaching community faced a crucial hit in a financial way. So, sir, how to solve this problem?
Well, which community did you say?
The teaching community.
The teaching community. The teaching community has a special advantage in financial base, did you say?
Yes, sir. A crucial hit in financial way.
Oh, I see. I think that is a good observation. Teaching community in India has done much better now than 30-35 years ago. Professors in India were paid pitiful 35-40 years ago. There were not that many teaching jobs in India at that time. In fact, about 40 years ago, I finished my PhD in 1982. But 40 years ago, I started looking for a job. The difference in my salary in India and in US was roughly 20 times difference. I got about $20,000 job here in 1980, and my Indian salary was $1,000 that time. So clearly, 20 times I was better off by getting the salary in US. But that difference has come down now. The US salaries are about 80,000. Indian salaries are about $10,000, and which means only 8 times there is a higher pay for teaching community. So teaching community wage difference has really come down. And if it has come down, then the teaching profession in India has done a much better job. You are right. And they should enjoy it. I think they should thank themselves that they are paid so well now compared to the olden times 30-35 years ago.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Venugopal has another question. What is the COVID impact on global education, especially in technical areas. Uh,
I
and
I already talked about that. The effect of COVID on technical education or education in general is so undescribable. It is so vast that there are some ramifications of that. And I think, as I said, the new normal is going to be completely different than the old normal. If you have the understanding that we will go back to the technical education of old times, then that probably is not going to happen in next near future. It's not going to happen in definitely not next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, probably 5 to 10. But again, that I do not know the exact answer to that question, whether we will actually go back to the technical education of olden days.
so we have another question from Dr. Himanshu. Is centralized policy effective in monitoring both economy and education in India?
Which policy?
Centralized policy, sir.
Centralized policy. Yeah, I think so. In India, we have a central decision-making process there. I think most of our ministries are so powerful, like Human Resources Development, HRD minister makes decisions about who will be the director of all IITs. And I think our centralized decision-making is pretty popular and has been there for a very long time. Some people hold a lot of power to change our world in India. That type of power control is not found anywhere else in the world. So I think we will continue with that model. I think governments are getting more and more powerful with this coronavirus thing.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Ms. Ankita that reads, from the Indian perspective, with such a population, keeping at bay the Malthusian theory or Marx demography theory, where do we go with such a huge population? Even the COVID-19 situation could have been better had the population was less. So where do we go from here with such a population?
Well, I know. I think Indian population problem has been, well, I don't know whether it is really a problem or not, but whatever it is, the Indian population thing has been discussed in a pessimistic way or in optimistic way in a very, very long time. Means I was a very acute observer of demography, and that was one of my field in masters too. So I know, I think 1970s is a good lesson for Indian policymakers, especially in Indira Gandhi administration, where they passed a law of compulsory sterilization in 74 for having a third child by any government employee. Now, if that bill was passed in the parliament, we did a horrendous job of implementing that bill correctly, because compulsory sterilization was done even before the third child. There was a lot of administrative problems. There was bribery. Police were getting extra money for bringing some volunteers for compulsory, and that led to the emergency days, and then emergency really taught a lesson to Prime Minister that time, Indira Gandhi, that maybe we don't want to force this compulsory sterilization and a compulsory population control. So that leaves us a liberty to have as many children as we want. And I think the verdict is very clear that people of India prefer a freedom to decide how many children they want. Otherwise, government's existence becomes questionable. And with that premise, we know we cannot put controls on the population. So we have to accept whatever population growth rate we get. And I think Kerala model is clear, and there are a few other models which are clear that the only way to stop this increasing population is education. When ladies and gentlemen get more education about the economic benefits of a smaller number of children, they probably start having them. Things are changing a little bit. Our growth rate is steady and declining. And I think that's the good news. But to say that, do you think coronavirus would have fewer effects if the population was less? Probably. But can we get less population by outside policies? The answer is absolutely not.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Dr. Vitla. He asks, how could we apply for teaching profession in foreign countries?
Well, I think if you want to apply for teaching professions in foreign countries, focus on Australia, Canada, probably England and Germany, because they are more inviting countries now than US is. I think the Trump administration is very much clamping down on immigration. It's very getting harder and harder to enter US. And if our higher education is getting into lower funding, lower enrollment of students, then there are going to be fewer opportunities in higher education in US. So clearly US is probably not, but there are several other very good, attractive countries in the world where one can apply for those.
So we have another question from Raghu Vamshi. How do you differentiate the approach of a college teacher in India and the US as far as research is concerned?
As far as what is concerned? Research is concerned. Okay. Well, as far as research is concerned in the US, I think I think the idea is that you have to have little more quality research because our resources here are a little bit better than in India. We all faculty members have an access to computer and the library and probably a research assistant if you are an established professor here. In India, I don't know whether that many resources are there for each and every professor or not. So they expect more here in the US. So they reward a higher quality research in the US. And in India, we do those, but we don't really do as much research as they do. I think most of the research in almost all fields is done better in the US than any other country. I don't want to point fingers only on India, but yeah, US is clearly the best researching country in the world.
Thank you, sir. We'll conclude now with a last question which I have.
Yes.
Sir, what fascinates you about this situation where we are confronting a trade-off of save the economy versus save the people?
What fascinates me?
Yes, sir. In this such an odd situation where we have to make a trade-off of saving the economy and saving the people.
Well, I think fascination is not really a good word. It doesn't really fascinate me. But I think saving the people is absolutely necessary thing to do. And in fact, I wanted to save the future of those migrants who were walking so long and for so many days in many of the states in India, and I felt very sorry for that. I think saving people is clearly a first priority. Doesn't matter what kind of policy you had to adopt. So with the corona outset, something had to be done, and something was being done, and clearly that was a very nice thing that the policymakers did. All I am doing is that I'm trying to point out to you that if policymakers keep doing this on a very large basis for a long time, there are consequences which we cannot ignore. And I think that's the main lesson, that too much of this expansionary fiscal and monetary policies have some unwanted bad side effects of it, and those externalities have to be taken into account. That's the main thing I wanted to say. But again, Anjali, before you say something, let me thank all of you for being here. Our attendance number, at least in my session here, is 145. That's a lot of people, guys, and I'm so happy that all of you were here to listen for all this time. But it is absolutely a delightful thing for me to be here, and thanks for having me, to Dr. Tripathi, and I hope this was as enjoyable to you as it was for me. And in the future, hopefully, we will run into each other again. And thank you very much for being here. Yes, Anjali, it's you now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this informative session. We got to learn a lot of things from you. Dear participants, we will be having the next session today from 10:45 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. by Dr. Khagendra Acharya. Kindly attend the session on time. Now I request Dr. Dhananjay Tripathi, sir, the convener of the workshop, to take over. Sir.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you so much, Dr. Kulkarni. It was really a very interesting session, and I could see in the chat box there are a lot of questions, but due to limitation of time, we cannot take all the questions. But let me assure to all the people who have put forward their questions, we are going to compile the questions and we are going to, email to Professor Kulkarni, and you will get the replies. I hope. I'm not sure whether I will be sharing the email of Professor Kulkarni with all the participants, but definitely I will be sharing the questions, and if I'll get a reply, I'll forward the questions to the participants. Anyway, you can access Professor Kulkarni's contacts on the university page. You have we have the same page on our website also. You can see the page of the workshop, and you can directly jump to the website of the university. So thank you so much, sir. It was really very interesting session. People had really raised a lot of questions, and raising question is a clear-cut indication that they have enjoyed, they have learned, and as you said, these are challenging times. We are learning to cope with these. Hopefully, we'll see you again sometime in future, maybe sometime on the campus of NIT Sikkim, whenever you visit India. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. When I'm in India, I will let you know, and if we can, I'll be happy to come to Sikkim, where I have never been. Actually, I have traveled quite a bit of India, but not ever to Sikkim. But someday, if you guys want me, I will be happy to go. And for the participants, if you want to know anything more about me, just go to kulkarnibooks.com. That's my personal website, and take a look at it and let me know what you think about it. But thank you very much for again having me, and we will be in touch.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Session, I won't say straight away. We will be breaking for 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes, we'll again reassembled. I would request everybody to please join before 45 past 10, so that we can start the session on time. Dr. Acharya will be joining us very shortly. So meanwhile, we'll have a break of 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes, I request everybody please join us on time. The next session is going to be very interesting, because I have heard Acharya many a times, and it's my personal experience. He talks brilliantly, actually. So let's break for 10 minutes. We'll reassemble again. Or you can stay. You can stay back. You can stay back. You can stay connected. He will be joining maybe in next 10 to 15 minutes. So for as of now, I'm here. I'm here live. I'm just waiting for the resource person. Once he joins, we'll start the session.